Morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting of the TRPA Governing Board to order. The date is Wednesday, August 28th, 2024, and it is 11:16 a.m. The first item on the agenda is the roll call to determine a quorum. Maria?
Ms. Alding,
Here.
Mr. Aguilar, Mr. Bass, Ms. Conrad Seda,
Here.
Ms. Faustinos,
Here.
Ms. Gustafson,
Here.
Ms. Hayes,
Here.
Ms. Hill,
Here.
Mr. Henigman,
Here.
Mr. Keykefer,
Here.
Ms. Lane,
Here.
Ms. Loomer, she's Ms. Loomer. I see you online. I'll circle back. Ms. Hales,
Here.
Mr. Settlemeyer,
Here.
Ms. Williamson,
Here.
and Ms. Loomer. Okay, what do we have? Madam Chair, we make sure we have 5. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate that. I'll go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For the members of the public who are joining us remotely, to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov and under the calendar header, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for August 28th, 2024. There you'll find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address board members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking Raise Hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the board. If you've used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as informational only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the very end of the meeting. For items agendized for action or possible action, we will hear public comment before the board takes any action. To remote board members, if you wish to speak, please also raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. And remote board members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. And please remember to mute your mic unless you're speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would also like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able. Members of the public who have joined us here in person, please use the sign-in sheets at the back of the room to indicate which item you're intending to comment on. And at the appropriate time for public comment on the agenda, please line up at the podium to speak. Board members who are here in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you are viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent any feedback. And so with that, we'll go to the second item on our agenda, the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Keykefer, will you lead us today? Thank you. We'll move then to item 3, approval of the agenda. And we have quite a few changes to the agenda. So I'm going to let our executive director walk us through those changes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the last board meeting of August and this beautiful day in Lake Tahoe. We have several changes, so I'm going to just give you the rundown here. The appeals that you see on your agenda, items 6A and B, have both been continued. The legal committee did hear discussion around the single parcel pier, and the legal committee report, Chair Williamson can discuss that during the legal report, but both of those are coming off the main agenda. So that means that we are then going to proceed this morning before lunch into our reports. So items 8 through 10, Executive Director Status Report, General Counsel Report, governing board member and committee reports will proceed now. We will take a lunch break and then we will resume the afternoon session for the Meeks Bay restoration. And I should say the other items, minutes and consent will stay as is. So just the big changes, the appeals are coming off and then we'll take reports. We'll break for lunch. We'll go to the Meeks Bay item. And I see our general counsel is ready to hit the button.
Yes, I just wanted to make certain to clarify that the single-use peer application is continued only for 30 days. We'll bring it back in September.
Okay.
The other one will figure out where it should come back.
Very well. That is the change of the agenda.
Okay, well, if I get it mixed up, you'll let me know. So I'll try to make those changes as we move forward. Okay, so we'll deem the agenda approved as amended for the record. And we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have a draft set of minutes from July 24th on page 31 of our packet. Does any board member wish to make a change?
Just like Vince, I'm very reliable. Yes, Madam Chair, I have some minor clerical changes that I've forwarded on to Maria, and with that, I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Thank
From the
you.
meeting of July 24th, 2024.
Thank you. No one else has any other comments? Maria, we'll pass it to you to call the roll, or can I do a voice vote even though we have remote? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone object or any abstention? Okay. We'll move on then to item 5, our TRPA consent calendar. There are 7 items on consent. 6 items were reviewed by the Operations and Governance Committee and 1 which wasn't reviewed in committee. As a reminder to the public, after the board discussion on this item, you may raise your hand to be called on in Zoom or to be unmuted to share your comments. So with that, Ms. Lane, may we have a report from the Operations and Governance Committee meeting this morning?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The Operations and Governance Committee met this morning and thoroughly reviewed items 1 through 6 on the consent agenda. This is actually a very exciting agenda that we had because this is representing various water quality mitigation fund releases to various agencies that are all doing really terrific water quality projects that include the city of South Lake Tahoe, who had a request for a little over $600,000 in various water quality mitigation funds. Placer County had a request for $60,000, and Washoe County had a request for $40,000. And I do want to congratulate all of those various jurisdictions for coming forward with projects to utilize those mitigation funds. As a reminder, and the executive director brought this to our attention, those mitigation funds are collected, out of developer fees specifically to have public improvements like these done. We want to see these funds being utilized, and this is a great representation of good work that's being done in the public. So we happily recommend all 5 of those recommendations to the board for approval. Item number 6 we heard is the release of $365,000, well, actually $365,500 to the Tahoe Transportation District directly from the state of Nevada for operational funds. And I want to thank my fellow colleague, Ms. Hill, for all her work that she's done to help secure those funds. It's very important. And our committee recommends adoption of that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Do any board members have any questions on those items? I don't see any. Are there any online that have questions on those items? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, we'll go on then to consent calendar and item number 7, which is APC membership reappointment for the El Dorado County lay member Jason Drew. The information on this item is on page 91 of your packet. Do any board members have any questions or comments on consent item number 7? I'm not seeing any. Then we'll go to public comment on our consent calendar items. If any of you in the room would like to address the Consent calendar items, please come up to the podium now. And any of you online, raise your hand and we'll call on you to be unmuted. Any comments in the room on our consent calendar items? Not seeing any. Do we have any hands raised online to comment on consent calendar items?
Madam Chair, we have no hands raised online to comment.
Thank you. Then we'll close the public comment and I would look for a motion to approve our consent calendar.
So moved.
We have a motion. Any discussion from the board? Then Maria, I'll ask you to call a roll call vote.
Ms. Aldine,
Yes.
Mr. Bass, Mr. Aguilar,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos,
Yes.
Mr. Keycapper,
Yes.
Mr. Henigman,
Yes.
Ms. Hales,
Yes.
Ms. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemeyer, Ms. Boomer,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. And again, a reminder to the public, if you've just tuned in, we have some changes on our agenda today and our public hearing will be after our lunch break. So I'm going to skip now to reports. This is agenda item 8, and I'm going to pass it over to our Executive Director, Julie Reagan, for a Director Status Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I have some slides to share with you. We have some additional staff that are going to round this out before I turn it over to our General Counsel for an update. I will take the next slide, please. Thank you, Tracy. We wanted to start fresh from the Tahoe Summit, and many of you were able to attend in person at Round Hill Pines, which was an incredible day. One of our team members said Lake Tahoe put on a spectacular show. It was the perfect Tahoe day, a little windy, not too windy, plenty sun for those of us who got sunburned. We always get a little summit sunburn, but it couldn't have been more spectacular with Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, as you see in the photo to the left, as our host. And she was able to secure, with a lot of help, and I will give a little bit of the backstory there, to have our keynote be Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who's the Secretary of Transportation. And as you, for those of you who are newer on the board, we've been doing this now for 28 years. The first summit was with President Bill Clinton. And at the time, Senator Harry Reid, Senator Feinstein, and our delegation was successful in shining this national spotlight on the lake. And we've been continuing this tradition for nearly 30 years. It's quite remarkable that we have such high level support from Washington, from both our states, our local officials, the community, the Washoe tribe, the science community, nonprofits, the residents here in Tahoe. And we do this every year. It's quite amazing. I really wanted to take the opportunity to thank certainly Secretary Buttigieg's visit was the result of a lot of hard work from Senator Cortez Masto and our delegation, but even our very own Secretary Aguilar reached out and said, we need you to come and talk about transportation. And then Megan Hayes, our presidential appointee, when she joined the board to speak to a point that was discussed at the Transportation Committee earlier, we've been trying to raise the profile of transportation and the urgent needs around funding for transportation for quite a long time. And so we went to Megan and said, with all of your contacts in the administration in Washington, help us get more focus on transportation. She put us in touch with a key staffer from Secretary Buttigieg that we immediately went to work and brought him here for Western governors. He did a tour of the lake, met with Cindy Gustafson, Alexis Hill. We took him on a tour, and that was really the icing on the cake to bring all this together. And so a really large shout out to the entire TRPA team that worked to make all the pieces happen. The summit is a grand spectacle, and we walk away feeling renewed in our commitment to the restoration of the lake. But we often don't know the behind the scenes work that goes on with our many, many partners, the Tahoe Fund, the League to Save Lake Tahoe, just dozens and dozens of environmental improvement program implementers. And that's really led by our incredible team here with Kim Carringer and Sarah Underhill, who designed that incredibly beautiful poster that we all have souvenirs of year over year. I must say, sometimes we do the poster and we wonder, does anybody actually care about that poster? Or do they just throw that right in the recycle bin? And we actually had people come up to our team and say, I can't wait to get the poster. I frame them every year. It's a souvenir that I look forward to. So it warmed the heart that all the hard work to do that on behalf of our Senate office and the host to make that happen. So thank you, Sarah, for all the design work that goes into the summit. Victoria Ortiz, Jeff Cowan, Devin Middlebrook, who personally orchestrated all the security detail, all the back and forth of operational support for a cabinet secretary level visit, as well as the interaction with our Senate and House delegations, the governor's offices, all of that. Devin was seamless in his work, as well as our interns. We put them to work because there's always a lot of grunt work. Let's be honest. Somebody has to carry all those posters and materials over to the summit. And Dr. Kat McIntyre and Kim worked with the full EIP partnership, the 80+ partners that work to coordinate information, data, getting on the same page, getting in alignment. We often call the summit a forcing function, and it works because sometimes we're not on the same page right up until July, right up to August 1st. And then we get in a room, we sort things out, and we move forward in the best way possible for the benefit of Lake Tahoe. And the benefit of Tahoe is that it is a bipartisan passion for everyone. And I think that is in full display here. So just a couple more photographs of some of the team TRPA folks on the left at Round Hill Pines, and then moving around 1 o'clock on the right. We also had the high honor to take Secretary Buttigieg and his detail on the TRPA watercraft education vessel from Round Hill Pines over to Incline Village, where Senator Cortez Masto hosted a luncheon at the campus of UNR in Incline Village, the Tahoe campus for University of Nevada, Reno. And so that provided an opportunity for Chair Gustafson, myself, and Devin Middlebrook to educate the secretary and his team about some of the issues. Seeing Tahoe from the lake to shore was a different perspective that he really appreciated. It also got him there and he beat the traffic. I think he even didn't, nobody got stopped on the boat versus the construction on the land side, but he was able to see the 28 corridor from the water and to see the trail and the section of trail from Incline Village to Sand Harbor, where people were walking and biking. And of course, one of his famous quotes was that trails are not ornamental, they're fundamental, which is essential to our philosophy around active transportation here at the lake. So seeing it from the water was terrific, and our boat crew always does an amazing job providing a safe and educational experience on the water. And it also highlighted this need for this seamless systems approach. It's not just, getting people out of their cars, but giving other options, whether it's transit trails technology, and then some fine day, water taxis and a waterborne system, which is our big dream overall. And then, of course, the lower section quadrant of the photo, we had our Senate delegation with some of our key partners. And I will say the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act was in full display and on the minds and in the speeches of our members of the delegation. And we have had some movement. So very pleased to report, the Senate, Senator Cortez Masto and our senators on the Senate side of the delegation were able to move the Restoration Act extension through the Senate. So the Senate's work is done. We had yet to have a hearing scheduled in the House of Representatives. And Congressman Amodei has been just pounding on his colleagues for the last year or more to make it happen. So a really big thanks to Congressman Amodei for his help. And then Congressman Kiley, you heard at the summit, pledged to do his part as the newest member of the delegation to do the heavy lifting to make a hearing happen. And they were able to contact every member of the House Natural Resources Committee, and Congressman Kiley and his staff deserve a big thank you. We do have a hearing date in middle of September secured on the House of Representatives side. So really exciting because the act technically expires at the end of September in this fiscal year. So there's movement on the House side. And so again, the summit being a forcing function, is not hyperbole, that is real. It forces action and we're very happy about it, and happy to all of you who were able to make it, join online. And there is an announcement that just went out from our partners at the Tahoe Fund that the full summit can be streamed. So thanks for indulging a little extra time on this. With the agenda, we actually had a minute to get into the back and forth. I thought you'd appreciate it. Couple other highlights before I turn it over to some of our other staff. The Nevada Legislative Oversight Committee just wrapped up its interim session. This was actually the Friday after the summit. So it is a miracle that we even had a brain to focus on at that meeting because we were all a bit brain dead, but we persevered with the support of our great Nevada side colleagues and the whole board really. That's been a great resource here at TRPA to support us in those hearings. And many of you have attended the interim. Of course, during the years when the full Nevada legislature doesn't meet, we have an interim oversight committee, which the newest member, Key Keffer, who was Senate at the time, was our previous chair of that committee. And that committee has been very key over the years to raise the profile of Tahoe, not only here in the northern part of Nevada, but the southern Nevada constituency as well has been key to advancing the cause of Tahoe in the legislature. So the interim wrapped up on August 16th. We actually, that picture is from July, which was right here in this room. And then in August, we went to Carson City for the wrap up and what they call the work session. And there were 13 action items. Senator Skip Daly, who's the chair of the interim oversight committee, committed to action, and in previous interims, we've done, various things over the years. He wanted to have some bill drafts. So there are some bill drafts that were advanced by other partners, Tahoe Transportation District. The senator himself advanced several items. We went to work on getting our 600-foot no wake zone codified in Nevada to match the TRPA rules. And then we're going to do the same in California, which will allow our boat crew not to have support on the law enforcement side, because right now there's some discrepancy of the different, 200 feet versus 600 feet. We're going to clean all that up. And so that was one of the items that we advanced. There are also 2 items that we advanced to provide enabling legislation. So for example, in the North Shore, there are what are called business improvement districts, the BIDs, the BIDs. Nevada doesn't have the same ability to create those where businesses themselves can decide to tax themselves and support transit. And that's how a lot of transit support has been happening on the North Shore on the California side. That's a bill draft that's moving forward, as well as a housing impact fee. And this is something that our housing folks, John Hester in particular, did a lot of research to provide the committee. They had asked for ideas from us to put forward ideas that would use mitigation fees to support more smaller workforce housing units on the Nevada side, also enabling. And then there was a proposal put forward, a bill draft related to Article 9 of the compact put forward from Senator Daly that would really attack the scenic byway of State Route 28, improving some language around recreation safety and parking enforcement. There are also several letters that we expect to come out of the committee's work session support for environmental improvement bonds, a letter to us, to TRPA's governing board around our priorities, and the event center permit, which I will talk about when we get to items coming back in the future. So a big, very, very active session. And again, a big thanks to those who helped us support that. I will say one item that came through many meetings of that interim committee, which you also have heard from members of the public, is fire evacuation. That was brought to light in an entire meeting. We had established on the record really where TRPA's role fits, and that is more of a support, funding support, coordination with land use policy. But we were able to establish pretty clearly that law enforcement, emergency personnel, emergency offices, and the fire service are in charge of that. There's a big article in the San Francisco Chronicle today, if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to share, but the conversation will continue, and I just wanted to flag that for you. I'll take the next slide. Okay, just a couple more things. State of the Lake and Lake Clarity. We always have a joint press release from UC Davis. You might not realize that TRPA supports the monitoring that UC Davis has done. We've had a contract with Davis for decades and decades, and this is continuous data, of course, from Dr. Charles Goldman from the 1960s. So we have this great longitudinal data set. We released that jointly with UC Davis and our partners. And it was a little bit of a good news, bad news story that continues the trend of winter clarity looking great and summer clarity getting worse. And it is the tale of two cities, as Dr. Alex Forrest put out there in his presentation. He will be coming before you to get into more detail, but I just wanted to mention this essentially from 2023 compared to 2022. It was relatively stable. Now, it's not that 2023 wasn't it was an exceptional year for snowfall. And so what we also saw, I mean, typically in the years past, big years of snow bring clarity dips. We saw a little difference. Something is changing in the lake where it may not be following that traditional pattern. So that will get teased out in the briefing that you have. The lake did mix, and that often brings with it this burst of clean water from the bottom to the top. And so we had this exceptional winter clarity of about 92 feet, which I think was the clearest observation since 1983. So the winter story was incredible. We have also made a connection in the winter clarity improving from the investments right back to the operations release of mitigation funds. Member Lane hit the nail on the head. The investments that we're making in erosion control and stormwater investment and all the TMDL work is making a difference. We truly believe it's making a difference, but the temperatures are warming and there are a lot of factors that are driving summer clarity to be less. And we're going to dig into that in your briefing. So more to come on that. But there's been a great conversation in the community. We'll go to the next slide around the clarity results. The state of the lake is beyond clarity. Clarity is one component to a very large body of work that Davis put out there for a talk that was over in Grand Lebac, and some board members, member Gustafson was there and some others digging in with a panel discussion, and our very own Dan Segan attended on the right in the photo there with Dr. Monica Arienzo and Dr. Forrest. And microplastics were discussed, and what really is going on with microplastics and clarity is an area of research that you'll hear a lot more about in the coming years. And then on the right, the Tahoe Fund sponsored a TEDx Salon, Reno Salon talk, and Dan Segan, as well as Dennis Sabaglo from our staff, participated. Dennis talked about invasive species, New Zealand mud snails. Dan talked about the big picture of clarity and the connection to policy. So sometimes we get pretty down in the details of the science, but the connection to policy is where this board engages. And I think Dan did an amazing job of simplifying what is a pretty technical discussion. And it was very well responded to in both of those venues. And those are also available online. All right, what's coming up? So we've got an active fall ahead. My favorite time of the year, Christmas Valley. I already have a little gold on the aspen tree in the backyard. These cold nights in Christmas Valley have started to get a little edge of gold in the backyard. So that is a hint that fall is coming. If you didn't get the hint last week when it did snow, I think it snowed for the first time in August in several decades up high in a couple locations. But we do have the State of the Lake briefing with Dr. Forrest from UC Davis and Dan Segan. We have the Best in the Basin program coming next month in September. That is always a huge highlight for this board because we're recognizing the people who are on the ground doing the hard work to do projects that benefit the lake and that are compatible with our beautiful environment. We have the Tahoe Blue Event Center permit. So the Event Center permit I mentioned came up in the Nevada Legislative Oversight Committee. We're going to be bringing that back to this board to discuss some monitoring issues and the permit in general, because that center, of course, the board adopted it in 2020. The center didn't actually even open until last year. So I'm going to catch the board up on that. We've got the city of South Lake Tahoe doing some area plan amendments that is coming forward this fall. The Homewood Master Plan, the Homewood Mountain Resort Master Plan. We of course did the field tour last month, which was amazing, getting out and seeing on the ground some of these concepts that you'll be hearing about at the Regional Planning Committee in September, and then at the board in October is the schedule now. Of course, that's always fluid, so stay tuned. Threshold evaluation, that came up in the Nevada Legislative Oversight Committee too. That's our 4 or 5 year cycle of reporting out on the 150 plus standards that we have, our environmental standards in 10 categories. What is the status of those? And then what is the plan going forward for policy adjustments as needed? Shoreline program, this came up at the board retreat. What is happening with buoy enforcement? I want to say a big congratulations to our enforcement team, Steve Sweet, our compliance officers, and the Lake Tahoe Watercraft Education, the boat crew. They actually pulled illegal buoys yesterday. So this is something that team has been working on for actually some years. Buoys in the lake that are dropped are someone's property, and there is a lot of legal work. There's a lot of outreach and education, coordination with neighboring parcels, investigations. But we were able to successfully remove several buoys that were illegal and unauthorized. So I would love to dig into that in more detail in whatever venue works, whether it's a legal committee briefing or in front of the full board. Little round out of the shoreline program 5 years later, because we're really in full implementation. So that's something we'll be talking about in terms of agenda setting. And then the local government committee at the board retreat, we had a category of issues called emerging issues that we are going to take up some of them with the local government committee. So we're forming, we're holding that committee in a couple of months this fall. We'll get you the details on the dates. Our local reps are all in the local area, so we're holding that on a different day than the board meeting because it's a little easier for folks to convene. But one of the items that we'll be talking about there are public records requests. You spent a good deal of time last month talking about the policies around freedom of information, public records requests, and we thought the local government committee would be a great place to hear an update on that. So with that, I'm going to invite our staff to come up and just give you a couple quick updates on our housing work. Oh, wait, before that, Karen, don't forget, I forgot the big news of the day. Steve, come on up. Come on up. Our very own Steve Biddle is riding off into the sunset very soon. We just wanted to say thank you, Steve, for your many years of service at TRPA. It's been a joy. We've presented you with cutting boards in this venue and other big words of thanks for all the hard work that you do for TRPA, not to mention feeding us at lunch, which is happening very soon. But wanted to offer you a few words to say your goodbyes to the board.
I get to use this. I've set it up for 6 years. Well, it's been a pleasure to serve all of you for 6 years in a few months. And something funny I got to say last week was, oh, I've got to go meet with the Secret Service. I don't ever think I would have said that in my life. North Shore away missions, I call them, were challenging. I've gotten to do a lot of good work here. We've got rooms revamped, new roof, some air conditioners. It's just using all of the trades and tools and talents that I have to serve you guys. I'm changing, well, I'm semi-retiring, but changing my direction in life. We're going to do a lot of travel, and I don't need to work anymore. Anyway, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you, Steve.
I might have lunch ready in about 15 minutes.
That's perfect. Well done. All that, and we get lunch out of the deal. Thank you, Steve, for your service. We appreciate it. And then Karen Fink is going to tell you the latest on the next phase of our housing policy work.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everyone. Karen Fink, Long Range Program Manager. We're very excited to be launching the next phase of the Tahoe Living Strategic Priority, and we have some public workshops coming up September 9th and September 10th. So we just wanted to give you a quick overview of where we are now and what to look for in the coming months. So just the next slide, please. So just a quick refresher on how we got here. The Tahoe Living Strategic Priority is one of our strategic priorities that is really focused on looking at how TRPA can work with our partners to really look at what is our role in updating our policies to provide sufficient housing for our local workers and local residents while meeting our regional plan goals and environmental thresholds. So this matrix here, some of you may recognize, this is the work plan that we started with when the governing board originally appointed the Tahoe Living Working Group. This was this shows the direction that we got from the working group on how to move through some different phases, starting with kind of low-hanging fruit, things that wouldn't take as long. Those were the near-term items, and we started with harmonizing TRPA's accessory dwelling unit policy to accommodate some of the new rules in California. Then we moved on to the medium-term phase, which we called Phase 2 Affordable and Workforce Housing Amendments. And here we were originally planning to look at density incentives in town centers and multifamily zones, but we did receive input from the Tahoe Living Working Group and the Regional Planning Committee to expand that and to look at all of our development incentives together. So to look at density, height, coverage, and parking. So those were the amendments that you approved in December. And then the longer term amendments, this is what we're launching now. So this is the next phase of the Tahoe Living Priority. And you're going to see in the next slide, we're calling it Cultivating Community, Conserving the Basin. And this is the phase where we heard from the working group that what we really do need to take a look at our development rights system and how we can kind of retool it to remove some of the barriers to building smaller homes that are kind of inherent in that system. So we anticipate quite a bit of analysis and looking at policy alternatives in this amendment. So we did go out and get a grant from the state of California to ensure we would have enough funding to do an environmental impact statement that includes, cumulative impacts and current baseline condition. So over the next 2 years, we'll be moving through the planning process on this phase. So we'll be gathering public input. We'll be gathering public input on each of these phases here. We'll be building, first, we're going to build consensus around goals and outcomes. Then we'll be developing and testing policy alternatives and getting robust public input on that as well. And then we'll be completing the environmental analysis before we bring it back to the board for your consideration. So, a key element of this project and the grant is really expanding our capacity to engage with the community and building robust two-way engagement, particularly focusing on underserved communities. So there's more detail on our webpage, on exactly like what we'll be looking at in each of these 4 segments, and that is tahoeliving.org. And we will bring back reports periodically to the board to keep you apprised of our progress. So thank you.
That completes my report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Julie. We'll move on then to our legal counsel report.
Okay, I think we'll be discussing succession issues at the legal committee report. Just to let you know that our third attorney that we hired, Jack Mensick, right out of a clerkship, will be starting on a week from yesterday, on Tuesday, the 3rd. And we don't really have any major litigation updates, except we have been reviewing some additional filings on remedy in the case against Lahontan over the controlled methods test. The question there is, what's the fate of the NPDES permit that was not directly challenged? And that has some potentially some carryover into what ability do the parties have to rely on the information contained in the results that we got from the original use of the herbicides in the Keys. So that's being briefed, and the court will make a decision sometime in the next 3 months or so. So that's kind of bare bones legal report.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from board members on either of those reports? Not seeing any. Then we'll move on to governing board reports. This is item 9 on our agenda. Are there any board member reports? Yes, Ms. Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Legal Committee has 2 reports.
We're not on committees.
Oh,
yet,
sorry.
Just
Nope,
governing
just me.
board. Yeah.
I don't need to make any comments, then I'll wait till
Oh,
committee.
okay. Do either of you have a report? Anybody online from the governing board? I was just going to report on our Board of Supervisors. We were up here this last Tuesday and heard a report, did a workshop on housing programs that the governing board has been, or our Board of Supervisors been working on, and got a report on those successes of helping people through lease to locals and workforce housing deed restriction programs. But an exciting new program that staff is drafting and working with various builders and others to put together is where we would actually incentivize with low interest loans and a deed restriction potentially for builders or for accessory dwelling units, anything that will provide housing for the local workforce. So it was an exciting day. I look forward to the local government committee meeting because I know housing is on all of our minds. One of the numbers that I wanted to share, and I don't have it in front of me, and I was just asking staff to send it to me, but there's approximately 8,000 needed housing units between Tahoe and Truckee. Many of those are people that are currently commuting in. So when we consider the environmental impacts of having increased density, we also have to look at the fact of having those people living closer to where they work and the benefits that that creates. The other thing that was reported that I think is somewhat stunning, on North Shore, the average median house price today is 1.3 million. And the AMI that would be necessary for a family of 3 to acquire that house would be 350% of AMI. So often we hear, why do we not have an upper limit on our numbers? It is such a moving target, and I hope that we use data and reflection on, let's keep it on the local workforce. If you're willing to buy a house that's deed restricted and pass that on, because it's a 55-year deed restriction, and as it turns over, you must keep that deed restriction in place for another 55 years. That's hugely valuable, and we want to help give these people hope they can live and work in our community. So really interesting information, and I look forward to sharing more of that with our local government committee as we move forward. And then we will move to item 10, our committee reports. So legal, do you have a report?
I
to
sure
give,
do. Happy
Madam
know.
Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 reports coming out of legal committee. I'll start with the appeal first. We heard an interesting appeal this morning on a single-use pier, and in a denial on that application. And the legal committee, we spent the better part of an hour discussing this and decided we need some more facts. So we asked some specific questions of our fantastic legal team, which was, I think, also important to point out that they will also work with the appellant to make sure that we get a same set of facts. And so we can have some collaboration there. We want some more information around homeowners association pier and what that definition means, a little bit more on the 2018 shoreline regulations and some wording in there, a little bit more detail on interaction with staff. So we're going to do some fact finding and bring it back to you all in September. Actually, it's just going to hit the board, not legal committee, in September. Is that correct?
My understanding was that we were going to continue it for both considerations. Still, you come to you first for a recommendation and then come to the board.
Thank you.
for
So we'll
final action.
Thank you. So we'll hear that both in legal committee and at the board in September, with some more facts that we can hear first. So that's first. And second is the happy sad of succession planning for our lawyer. This is the point where I get to thank John Marshall again for all of his service. It's been invaluable. John is leaving us. He's trying to leave sooner, but we're trying to keep him till October. But he is very well deservedly looking at retirement, and we have some really wonderful attorneys who have joined our team. Graham and Marcia are sitting in the back here. Jack is going to be joining us in September. And so in legal committee, it was discussion only, but we started to talk about the hiring process we went through for Graham and Marcia and Jack, and how our leadership team here, we talked about succession planning at that time and through that hiring process, and how Graham had applied and was asked during interviews, and we put some thought into that at the interview level and at this board level of having Graham interested in taking over as general counsel. So we talked about that at legal committee and what that process may look like without opening that up to a larger search firm, and working with Graham in that succession plan. And so here I want to stop and pass it over to Julie for maybe a little more background, but it was a great discussion this morning, and there was a lot of consensus around that process as we talked about it. So Julie, maybe a little more detail though, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice Chair Williamson. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. We just shared some background for the legal committee about the thought process as we went into expanding our legal team. And one of the first priorities that I had as the new executive director working with our executive team was just an overall operational assessment of the agency. And we found some areas where we needed more resources, and legal was at the top of the list. So we prioritized adding resources in the budget that you approved, not this fiscal year, but the year before. It was right out of the gate to expand our team. And it's amazing the work that had been done under John's leadership as general counsel, working with Marcia Birch, who had been a contractor, a consulting firm, a law firm of her own for many years. And so she has great institutional knowledge as well. And then with Catherine Houston, also was a very lean and mean machine of a legal team. But we recognize the need with legal pressures on the agency. We're getting in more litigation. It's just a sign of the times. We needed to reprioritize that. So we added resources. We were able to be very efficient in our budget process to bring in the personnel that you laid out, Vice Chair Williamson, with Jack starting next week. We had Grand St. Michelle at the time. When we did those recruitments, we really wanted to have a focus on candidates that would be interested in that succession planning for general counsel. It will be up to the board how we want to proceed, but we wanted you to at least know that we were strategic in the recruitment process that we did to get the legal team that we have now. And now Marcia is a permanent employee, not a contract employee. And so we have Marcia at 80% time, we have Jack, and we have Graham, and then John riding off into the sunset as he is impending his transition. So wanted to share a little bit of the thought process that we went through to get to where we are, to give you a head start on this big decision.
Thank you. And that's, I think, an important point as well, is that this was discussion only at legal. This will be coming to us next month at the board level for a vote. So we'll discuss more there, but this was something that was important to us to start. And in this thoughtful process of succession planning, that was a big issue at legal this morning. And those were, that's it. That's what we did this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. You've had a busy morning. Are there any reports from operations and governance, Ms. Lane, that we didn't already cover?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think I would just add that going forward, we're going to be looking at reviewing some internal policies that we haven't really looked back on since 2019. And we will be returning to monthly financials starting next month as well. So nothing else to report. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Hill on transportation?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We had a great discussion at the TRPA Transportation Committee. We made recommendations to the Connections 2050 Regional Transportation Plan goals and policies, as well as related regional plan transportation code sections, and had a great conversation giving direction to staff. And if folks want to check out those policies in detail, they are on our website and are very exciting to see the new direction and the leadership that TRPA is taking with that. And then we had a great discussion on transportation funding, and our committee is pushing on staff to do more. And I also wanted to recognize our team for all of the work that they are doing in the transportation space, but we're continuing to push. So the community should know that. And those are all the things that we did today. Thank you.
Do any of the other committees have a report? I don't know that they've met, but I'm not seeing any. Hands go up. Okay. Then it would come time, I think, for our lunch break. Julie, what would you anticipate for timing?
Would the board consider a half an hour, 30 minutes? Okay. Very well.
So we'll be back in 30 minutes to reconvene the governing board meeting. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, good timing. Good afternoon, everyone. We are ready to reconvene the governing board meeting and move on to our item 7A. This is the certification of the final environmental impact statement for the Meeks Bay Restoration Project. Information on this item can be found on page 257 of the board packet. And as a reminder to the public, after the staff presentation and board discussion, we will hear public comment. So I'm going to turn this over now. Julie, did you want to start off, or Rebecca?
Let's see. Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I will turn it over to Rebecca. We have some guest speakers to invite, but maybe Rebecca, I will turn it over to you to get started.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Rebecca Cremeen, a senior planner with the Regional Planning Department, and we're very excited today to bring the Meeks Bay Restoration Project to you for potential certification of the final environmental impact statement. And this project has been a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the public and stakeholders for this project. And today we have Eric Walker with the Forest Service, as well as Chairman Smokey here to speak on the project. And we have our consulting team, Adam Lewandowski, as well, who will be presenting the findings of the environmental document. This project is a really important environmental improvement project. It meets a lot of our restoration goals as well as recreation goals for the region, including some of the projects we've identified in the 89 corridor management plan and tied to some of the ecosystem improvements on the West Shore. And with that, I would open it up for, I don't know if we want to have our speakers first, or.
I think we'd love to invite Chairman Smokey up, if I may invite him up to the podium. Just really very fortunate to have him come today, and just fresh off the Tahoe Summit, some of us were able to visit with Chairman Smokey, Cyril Smokey, Chairman of the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California. And just, as a sovereign nation, we're very delighted that we're able to work collaboratively on a number of things, and wanted just to get your perspective on this project and other projects that you might be working on with your colleagues with the tribe in Meeks Bay. And you just have to hit the little button there. There you go.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Cyril Smokey, Chairman of Washoe Tribe, Nevada, California. Really here today, really speak on the Meeks Bay Restoration Project, which is something that we really support. It's been long overdue. That whole area has been needing the restructuring. And we're still looking at a lot of the details as to what's truly going to go into there. But for the tribe, it's just really important that the area is restored. The water that runs through there can be used more naturally as it used to, for many years, possibly in the future, being a big part of the re-implementation of Lahontan cutthroat trout, and not having the way the current bridge sits as a man-made barrier, so that spawning can't occur anymore through that area. It's in hopes that eventually that fish would be able to replenish that area as they used to, years ago. Getting that back into it, the structure for fish, as well as the there's my understanding is there's also some presence of new algae blooms in the area, so that's another aquatic invasive species issue that needs to be addressed directly in that waterway as well. But really just overall, that's just a piece of work that we as a Washoe Tribe have been involved in with that whole area. Yes, we do run the resort, but also working on the Meeks Meadow project area. That Mealawata, that area that's the name of the stream, is the Mealawata, that runs all the way from the mountainside all the way down. But restoring the meadow area has been a large project that the Washoe Tribe has been working on. And again, hopefully, we're hoping to close that project soon, but throughout the years, the pandemic, heavy snows that we haven't had in a while have all kind of thrown barriers in getting these projects complete. But having the creek restoration come through is something that is just an additional part of that, and really fully restoring that whole area, as well as to our future planning and doing more projects within the resort area itself to then get rid of all of the old piping systems and a lot of the degrading infrastructure that was there that could be harmful or have environmental impacts in the future. And but the area just that whole area is excuse me, not natural, it's lost my wording. It is an original campsite for Washoe people in that area, and there's still a large Washoe presence with the archaeology that's still around the area that is all mostly protected now, and we monitor those spaces as well. So that area is specifically very important to the Washoe tribe and the Washoe people. But having the partnerships to be able to move forward with these projects and hopefully get the approval for them to move forward is just really helpful for the environment. It's helpful for the entire area, and that's why we're here to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here today and your comments. Such an important partnership we have with the tribe.
I didn't know if we wanted Eric Walker to introduce Eric Walker, our forest supervisor, to speak on the project.
Thank you and good afternoon. Appreciate you having me here today to speak to the governing board. And thank you, Chairman Smokey, for making the trip up and your comments on this project. So many of you are aware this has been a long time in coming. We've been, as an agency, and all of our partners in this room and all of our publics have been at this for a long time. And so I kind of unceremoniously it's like we should have had all of you sitting around the table while I signed the decision. But knowing that, it has so much importance, and you've heard some, the importance to the tribe on this project. So, through this long-term planning effort, we've worked closely with tribal members, TRP staff, multiple partners, both public, state, local, and federal agencies, and our publics, because we knew there was, when we began this project, that there was a lot of concerns, a lot of issues that needed to be addressed, given the historic, use of the last 50, 60 years when the resort was developed and the marina was put in place, but also recognizing that some of the development and some of the use there was not compatible with long-term ecological health, and perhaps not even compatible with some of our desirable sustainable recreation opportunities. And so we embarked on this project to make sure that we could find strike that balance between ecological health and access to public lands and use of public lands. So again, a balanced decision along those lines. As Chairman Smokey alluded to, we have a lot of other work going on there. So this work further complements it. I kind of think of it as the third leg in the stool that will bring and restore ecological function, not just to the marina and the bay, but as Chairman mentioned, moving into the Meeks Meadow restoration work that we will be implementing later this fall in partnership with the Washoe tribe. And if you all are probably familiar with, we issued a new 20 to 30-year permit with the Washoe tribe for the management of the Meeks Bay Resort, which also includes the campground to the south of Meeks Creek. So we've, in a sense, consolidated the recreation management. We are working on the restoration of the near, shoreline to near shore to all the way up to the headwaters, so that we can recognize and the benefits of this kind of managing the landscape holistically. This, as Chairman Smokey mentioned, will help in the recovery efforts of Lahont and cutthroat trout. So there's elements of this project that will allow for safe passage of fish upstream of the appropriate kind, but making sure that we isolate Lahont cutthroat trout from non-native salmonids that pose a risk to them. We'll also be able to enhance Tahoe yellowcrest habitat through this project, hopefully eliminate harmful algal blooms that create in these stagnant waters by restoring that ecological health. So it's really a great opportunity to demonstrate what we can do with our landscape to provide access, have healthy ecological functions. And I think as a model for other opportunities that we have around the lake and where we've had demonstrated similar types of cooperative efforts such as tailored shellac restoration and stuff. So, you know, the Uber collaboration that we're so well known for in the Tahoe Basin in support of the environmental improvement project. This is just one more of those points. And I'd like to think this one has a little bit of an exclamation point with it, given the significance of it. As part of our planning effort, we did receive one objection. The objection was largely around some concerns that maybe there would be eventually a pier put in place because there was some confusing language in our document that we were able to clarify in our record of decision. There was also some concern that maybe because we are looking to remove buildings from near shore or shoreline area and move them away, and that was going to create maybe a disadvantage to people who normally don't be able to recreate so close to the shoreline. But we're not removing them, we're setting them off the shore. So there will not be development in front of them, and we'll have a more natural shoreline environment for people to enjoy and for ecosystem efforts to occur. So we were able to meet with the objector, explain, provide the clarity, and therefore, while the objector did not withdraw their objection, they did not indicate in our reviewing official, Deputy Regional Forester, approved the decision that I had made. So I feel like by and large, we have large community support. I realize it may not be absolute community support, but I felt that we've done our due diligence to include all the affected parties that have an interest in that location, done our due diligence to document that and put forth a decision that is hopefully supported by the board. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions members of the board have. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Ms. Aldine.
Hi, Eric. So I know I remember the conversations about whether or not to, support the development of a pier, either as a boating amenity or just to facilitate access to people who have mobility issues. So how have you mitigated that? Obviously, the preferred alternatives does not include a pier. And I know that efforts are underway with our the Mix Bay Fire Protection District to perhaps locate a more suitable place for a pier that can accommodate their needs. But are there pathways? Are there ramps? What amenities are being included to assist or improve accessibility to people with mobility issues at Mix Bay?
Thank you for that question. And I may rely on Ashley Cyber, who's been involved with this project from day one. So one of the parts of this decision is we're looking to establish a mobile accessibility type of boat ramp, in a sense that it will provide universal access so folks can, and when I say a boat ramp, it's what I would call a soft feature. It's something that could sit on the ground. You don't have to build it, so to speak. You buy it, and then it would allow for people. And so we'll be working closely with the Washoe tribe to implement that, put in, access mats so that we have that universal accessibility at this site. Similar to, I think, some of the work that the California Tahoe Conservancy has done on the North Shore with some of the access from their lands to the shore. In relation to the interest to have a safety pier or access for our emergency services to access, based on conversations, not that I had, but staff had and stuff with them, it was agreed that was not likely the best location, since that is not a year-round accessible. We would have had to address like plowing and stuff for 365 type of use, because the resort and the campground are not, in a sense, accessible without being on the snow year-round. So there's perhaps better location in the Tahoe City area or somewhere else where there is year-round accessibility for such a feature. So we did not, when we came forth, we did not hear that the fire district was concerned with the decision we were making.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Not seeing other questions from the board members, so thank you, Eric.
And Madam Chair, I just want to thank Eric for kicking us off, and just to tie back a real life example of our earlier discussion around the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. What's incredible about this presentation is that it's a real world example of a project that we've dreamed about for many years, and there were multiple sources of funding, but the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funds really brought us over the finish line, and it has been years in the making. And it wouldn't be possible without that great partnership that Eric mentioned, the kind of collaboration that we have through the Environmental Improvement Program. And so with that, I'll turn it back to staff.
Okay, thank you, Julie. And I wanted to thank the Washoe Tribe as well for all the tours that your staff and some of the folks with the Environmental Department did for us. Some of the governing board members and APC had the chance to go out and see the site. So that was really powerful and really important to understand on the ground the projects, both the Meadow project as well as the creek restoration. So with that, can I have the next slide, please? So for folks who are not completely familiar with Meeks Bay on the West Shore, this slide is here to orient you to the location of Meeks Bay, and it's located just south of Sugar Pine Point State Park and just north of Emerald Bay. Next slide. And then zooming in a little bit to the project area here, this shows the outline of the area that we studied for this project. And in the middle, you'll see the lagoon, which is Meeks Creek, and that was dredged in 1960 for a marina. And in this photo, the marina infrastructure has been removed, all the docks are gone, and that's what it looks like today. On the north side of the creek is the Meeks Bay Resort, and on the south side is the Meeks Bay Campground, and both of those are now managed by the Washoe Tribe. The green line just shows the area of analysis, so the area of impact that we studied in this environmental document. Next slide. And as I touched on a little bit earlier, this project does relate to many plans and programs at Lake Tahoe. So the landscape restoration strategy on the West Shore is tied to ecosystem resilience and watershed restoration, as well as this project. The 89 Corridor Management Plan does identify Meeks Bay and the bridge as a high priority improvement project that needs to happen to allow for that restoration of the stream. It also identifies Meeks Bay as a recreation hotspot where we need to do some improvements for bicycle and pedestrian passage. So we've included those components in the project. And then the Lake Tahoe Shoreline Plan would apply to any of the improvements that we do at Meeks Bay. So any of those infrastructure changes would need to be compliant with the Lake Tahoe Shoreline Plan. Next slide. These images are of the restoration project at the Meadow. So what Chairman Smokey was referring to. We've got some of the conifer restoration and removal project in these photos, some of the youth getting out there and really contributing to this project. So it's very exciting to see this work happening right now, and then the work coming up with the restoration of the creek as well. Next slide. And with that, I will pass the presentation to Ashley Cyber.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk briefly about the purpose and need for this project. I think quite a few of the folks in this room have been along for this process here and have heard most of this before, but we just wanted to make sure that everybody was able to get a full view of the project here. So like Rebecca mentioned, that photo on the left there, you can see an aerial of the site in the 1950s before the marina was installed. And you can see how there's a lagoon backwater area there. It's a barrier beach system similar to the Taylor-Tlac area for folks who are familiar with that barrier beach ecosystem. And in the 1960s, the marina was put in, and then the Forest Service acquired the property, both sides, north and south of the creek, with that infrastructure in place. And since then, the marina was operating. It operated, depending upon the year, at different levels. And we had a pretty significant period of drought. There was about 5 years where the marina was essentially non-operable or operable at a very low level because of the low water levels. And at that time, we also received a violation for pollutant loads on the boat ramp. And so with all of those things together, it really was the impetus for taking a look at this site again as to what is the right future for, specifically the marina, but the lagoon ecosystem there. So really, we looked at the project with the goal of moving Meeks Creek, the stream channel, and the wetland lagoon to a more natural condition that supports functioning ecosystems, but while continuing to support sustainable recreation opportunities, because the site is an active recreation site. Next slide, please. And so we identified multiple needs related to ecosystem functions. So we talked about improving hydraulic function and fish passage. You can see the picture on the right there of the bridge that causes the aquatic organisms, obviously can't get past that large constriction there. So it's essentially a, AOP passage issue. The ducks like it apparently, but yeah, they do have to jump. Yes. And we talked about how this was a barrier beach habitat. And so looking to restore that habitat to resilient and to be more resilient also to climate change, with the realization that the marina's operability is really dependent upon lake levels, which are highly affected by drought as well. We want to promote Tahoe yellowcress. It is, of course, our endemic species here that grows on the beaches, and it grows on. It really likes these barrier beach ecosystems, similar to, like I mentioned, Taylor to Lac area there. And Lahontan cutthroat trout is, of course, a species of great interest for reintroduction in the Meeks Creek area. And aquatic invasive species, the marina, is the #1 source of AIS in Lake Tahoe behind the Keys. So, or at least it was until we started the current treatment that's going on there. Next slide, please. And we want to do all of these things with these shared goals of maintaining and enhancing access to Lake Tahoe and National Forest System lands, and providing sustainable recreation opportunities that are consistent with that functioning ecosystem. And Adam's going to get into sort of, how the approaches that we took in order to, balance those two goals. And of course, we want to look at opportunities for education and interpretation of the site and enhancing species of value to the Washoe tribe. Next slide, please. So this process was kicked off in 2018. The Forest Service went out to scoping to the public. At that time, we had not yet formed the partnership with TRPA. After we went out to scoping, that was when the LTRA funds came through for us to form this partnership, and TRPA contracted with Ascent, and Ascent conducted a stakeholder assessment based upon the scoping responses, and that helped to determine who was going to be on this stakeholder group. And so the stakeholder forum was convened, and I'll just give a quick list here of the sort of major players on that stakeholder forum. So we had members from the Lake Tahoe Water Trail, the Woodland Pier Association, Lake Tahoe Marina Association, Meeks Bay Fire District, just some general West Shore community members, and longtime interest in the resort, Meeks Bay Vista Property Owners Association, Tahoe Lakefront Owners Association, the Washoe Tribe, both from the resort management side as well as from the cultural and language department side, Friends of the West Shore, I believe I said the League to Save Lake Tahoe already, Meeks Bay Yacht Club. And I apologize to any groups that I missed on the list, but the point being that we tried really hard to convene a group that had multiple interests in this site here. And so the stakeholder group convened 8 times over the course of the process. The stakeholder group helped to develop the alternatives that you will see, as well as helping the Forest Service and TRPA decide what the preferred alternative was going to be. And with that, I believe I'll pass it over to Adam.
All right. Hello, Adam Lewandowski with Ascent Environmental. And we worked through this, next slide, please. We worked through this collaborative stakeholder and public planning process to develop a set of alternatives that meet the purpose and need of restoring Meeks Creek in the lagoon, but also respond to the key issues that were brought up by stakeholders, by the public, and by other agencies. And pretty early in this process, it became clear that almost everyone supported the restoration of Meeks Creek in the lagoon. But there was a lot of concern about losing the important motorized boating access that's provided by the marina. And so during the alternatives development process, we really looked at every possible approach we could think of to try to continue to provide boat mooring or boat launching opportunities while also restoring Meeks Creek. So for example, we looked at trying to create a smaller marina in the current footprint with a smaller restoration project around the edge of the marina. We considered constructing new boat ramps elsewhere on the site. We even looked at new buoy fields. But after careful consideration, it really became clear that there just wasn't a feasible way to restore Meeks Creek and also continue to provide boat mooring and boat launching opportunities here. So that led us to look at other options for lake access, other ways to try to offset that loss of boat access, including things like a pier and the floating paddlecraft launch that was mentioned earlier. Next slide. So the rationale for a pier was that, it wouldn't replace the exact same opportunities provided by the marina. It wouldn't allow launching of boats or mooring of boats, but it would be another lake access amenity that could potentially offset some of that loss of boating access. There were concerns about how the pier would change the character of the site, about whether it would lead to conflicts between motorized boats coming to the pier and swimmers and non-motorized users. And the environmental document acknowledges that there would be a change in the character of the site, but really most of those concerns could be addressed through the right kind of site design, including things like enforcing the existing no wake zone and establishing dedicated swim beaches. And that's what's shown on the map here on the screen. Next slide. So we developed two different pier alternatives that are evaluated in the environmental document. And these are shown in the simulations on the screen. This is a view from the north end of Meeks Bay near the resort looking south. There's no existing pier there today, but this shows what those two piers would look like. The one on the top is a 300-foot fixed pier, and this would allow boats that launch elsewhere on the lake to come to Meeks Bay, temporarily dock at the pier, and people could get off and access the site from the lake. This would also accommodate one boat lift that would service that public safety vessel that was mentioned earlier. And the other option considered, shown on the bottom, that's a 100-foot floating pier. It would not accommodate motorized boating access, but it would be another lake access feature for pedestrians to get out and enjoy the lake. But a major concern with both of these pier options was the effects on scenic quality. And the environmental analysis determined that the 300-foot boating pier would result in a significant impact on scenic quality, particularly those views from the beach looking out of the lake. And that's really just because it would involve placing a new large pier in the middle of the bay in a location where there's not a pier today. And there's really no way to mitigate that scenic impact of a pier, particularly as it's viewed from the beach looking outwards. The environmental document found the 100-foot pier would also detract from scenic quality, but to a much less extent than the larger pier. And that's one of the reasons that the pier was not carried forward into the preferred alternative. And I'll describe that a little more in a moment. Next slide. So another key concern in the alternatives development and the environmental review was the effects on visitation and crowding. Anyone who's been out to Meeks Bay on a summer weekend knows that it gets pretty crowded today. And so there's a lot of concern about whether this would attract more visitors and lead to increased crowding. But really, as Ashley mentioned, the goal of the recreation improvements are to continue to provide sustainable recreation and to offset some of the loss of recreation from the removal of the marina. But the project's not intended to attract more visitors or to really substantially increase the capacity for visitors at the site. So we addressed these concerns first by making sure we had really good information on the current visitation, so we could accurately compare the effects of the different alternatives on visitation and crowding. We also developed a series of alternatives that reconfigure and improve the recreation amenities, but without really substantially increasing the visitor capacity. We took into account things like the loss of visitation from the removal of the marina, and where possible, we looked for opportunities to expand the usable beach area and to expand the day use areas to try to reduce crowding. Next slide. So as we moved from developing the alternatives into the environmental analysis, another key concern or key issue was selecting the most appropriate baseline conditions for the environmental analysis. And as Ashley had mentioned, the marina has been closed since 2015. The movable infrastructure, like the floating docks, have been removed, but all of the permanent infrastructure, the boat ramp, the bulkheads all remain in place. There's been no prior decision on the long-term fate of the marina. In fact, this process is intended to be the project or the point where we make a decision on the long-term fate of this marina. Without restoration of the creek, the marina could resume operation. And so the environmental document reflects that in the no action alternative. And this is really intended to allow all of you and the other lead agency decision makers to have a real accurate comparison of the options before you. If the restoration is not approved, the marina could resume operation, but if the restoration goes forward, the marina would go away. Next slide. So we reflected those baseline conditions in the no action alternative that's shown on the screen here. This does assume that the marina would return to operation. It also assumes there would be ongoing maintenance and management activities, but no other major changes to the facilities at the site. And just to help orient you to the existing conditions at Meeks Bay, you can see the two campgrounds are shown as those green areas. Kind of the brownish gray areas are the existing parking. The day use areas are shown in orange. The beach is the long yellowish sandy colored strip. And you can see some of the cabins and the lodges at Meeks Bay Resort as those small squares and rectangles up at the top of the screen. Next slide. So this is the conceptual plan for the restoration. This is included in all of the action alternatives. They all take a very similar approach to the restoration. It would involve removing the marina as well as all the fill material that had been placed around the marina, disposing of any contaminated soil, and then restoring a more natural creek channel at the upstream ends that would turn into a lagoon wetland closer to the lake, along with that natural barrier beach that Ashley described. The restoration would involve replacing the State Route 89 bridge to improve hydrologic conditions and also improve fish passage. And the project would enhance habitat for a variety of species and also increase the natural filtering of sediment and pollutants that come through and can be filtered in the wetland. The restoration would also allow for a trail bridge that could connect the north and south sides of Meeks Bay. And this would allow people to get from one side to the other without having to go out onto the highway and walk around on traffic. Next slide. So working closely with the stakeholders, we developed a set of 4 action alternatives that are evaluated in the environmental document. We first developed alternatives 1 through 3, and then we sought feedback from the public, other agencies, and the stakeholders through a series of public meetings before the environmental document or the environmental analysis began. The lead agency staff then developed the preferred alternative that's on the right-hand side of this table by combining the most desirable elements from each of those other 3 alternatives. As I mentioned, all of these action alternatives include that same approach for restoration. And so the major differences in the alternatives are in the type and design of the recreational facilities. And this table just summarizes some of the major differences between the alternatives. 2 of the alternatives included those different pier options that I mentioned. Alternative 3 and the preferred alternative included that small movable and universally accessible paddlecraft launch that was mentioned earlier. 2 of the alternatives, including the preferred alternative, propose relocating some of those lodges away from the shoreline. One of the alternatives considered expanding the campgrounds, and they all included different variations on internal pedestrian and bicycle circulation. Next slide. So this diagram shows the preferred alternative that's proposed by lead agency staff. It does include the removal of the marina, the full restoration. It does not include a pier, so it's really more of a non-motorized recreation emphasis with the preferred alternative. It does include that small floating paddlecraft launch that would improve accessibility to the lake for folks with mobility issues. It would relocate 2 of the older lodge style buildings in Meeks Bay Resort. that are right now right on the lakeshore. It would replace those with a series of smaller cabins that are set back further from the lakeshore while maintaining about the same capacity for visitors. And this would really improve scenic quality by getting the development further from the lake. It would allow for the replacement of some failing shoreline protection in that area with more natural shoreline restoration and protection. And it would open up some additional beach area for public recreation. The preferred alternative also reconfigures the existing campgrounds to improve privacy between the sites, improve vehicle circulation, and it could also include some yurts or other alternative camping opportunities while maintaining about the same number of campsites. The preferred alternative would also reconfigure and formalize the existing parking. Some of the parking is on dirt today, and it would reduce coverage, improve stormwater management, and it could include up to 14 additional parking spaces. It includes a Class 1 shared use path that would connect to the existing Class 1 path on the north end of the site and go through the site over a trail bridge on Meeks Creek. And it would also allow bike crossing of Meeks Creek on the replaced State Route 89 bridge. So there'd be two options for bicyclists to get across the creek. It'd reconfigure and slightly expand those day use areas, provide additional educational interpretive amenities, and it also includes some of those resource management elements that were mentioned before, like the ongoing aquatic invasive species management and the Tahoe yellow crest protection. Next slide. So these alternatives were all evaluated at an equal level of detail in the draft EIS, EIR, and this was released for public review in the summer of 2022. There were 3 different public forums to collect comments during that comment period. And this environmental document also describes and accounts for the effects of a series of resource protection measures. And these are fairly standard measures that the Forest Service implements to minimize the risk of environmental impacts during construction activities in sensitive environments. The environmental document also identified 8 mitigation measures, and those were also mostly focused on those short-term construction impacts of working in a sensitive environment next to the lake. All right, next slide. So just some of the high-level findings of the environmental document. It did determine that all the alternatives would have some beneficial effects, and in particular, the preferred alternative would have resultant benefits to all the different topics that you see on the screen here. A lot of those are due to the restoration itself. It's intended to improve the environment, but there are also benefits associated with the improved recreational amenities, as well as the reduction in motorized boat traffic in Meeks Bay. And because those key issues were addressed through that collaborative alternatives development process, and because there are a series of resource protection measures and mitigation measures, the environmental document only identified 2 significant and unavoidable impacts. Go to the next slide, please. So for the first significant unavoidable impact is really associated with the loss of motorized watercraft access. And just to give you some context, the marina contains about 119 slips that would go away. And that represents about 6% of the existing moorings that are available to the general public in marinas around the lake, or about 11% of the existing moorings available to the general public in marinas on the West Shore. So the environmental document determined that loss of watercraft access would be a significant impact. It included a mitigation measure that would ensure that those moorings that are removed would return to the pool of available moorings available to other marinas around the lake. And so because those moorings would be returned to the pool of available moorings, over the long term, these slips would likely be replaced with new slips at other marinas around the lake. So that would maintain consistency with the total number of public moorings that were considered in the shoreline plan, and there'd be no net reduction in the long-term number of moorings available to the public. However, some of these slips could be replaced elsewhere on the lake, far away from the West Shore, and that could result in a localized, significant and unavoidable loss of watercraft access on the West Shore and in the vicinity of Meeks Bay. Next slide, please. So the second significant and unavoidable impact is related to the temporary construction with the replacement of the State Route 89 bridge. And that's really because to minimize the amount of time that traffic would be disrupted, the bridge replacement may require overnight construction, which could infect nearby residents. There's mitigation in the environmental document that would minimize the amount of construction, noise generating construction outside of normal working hours, but there still may be a need to do some construction overnight that could affect those nearby residents. Next slide. So after that public review period, the lead agencies considered and responded to all of the comments that were submitted and released the final environmental document in April of this year. The final document includes all of the analysis that was in the draft document with some targeted clarifications and corrections to respond to public comments. Appendix F of this document includes responses to all those comments that were submitted. As was mentioned earlier, the Forest Service has certified the NEPA element of this joint document. There was that one objection, but that's been resolved by the Forest Service, and the preferred alternative was approved and the record of decision signed by the Forest Service on August 12th. And I'll pass it back to Rebecca.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Next slide, please. So this chart just outlines the next steps for this project. As Adam mentioned, the record of decision was signed by the Forest Service. And then today we're considering certifying the final environmental impact statement for TRPA. Next, we'd have Lahontan Water Board would have adopt a resolution, and then we'd proceed into some permitting. So the permitting would be for some of the elements of the restoration and site design and the Caltrans bridge replacement. So Caltrans is preparing a separate environmental document that's very specific to the bridge. And so that will be available for public comment in the next 6 months. And it'll have more of the detailed design elements incorporated there. And the restoration project is moving forward into its design phase as well. And so that will be in concert with the bridge design as well. And with that, next slide, sorry. Before we move to public comment and board comment, I just wanted to make sure that the board is clear on the findings that we need to make to certify this EIS. So this slide here really outlines that the findings that you'll be making is that the EIS is technically adequate and where feasible has incorporated mitigation measures to reduce those impacts to a less than significant level in most cases. However, there are some short-term construction impacts and the impacts related to motorized recreation where the governing board must adopt a finding of overriding considerations, acknowledging that despite incorporating those mitigation measures, the impacts would be significant and unavoidable. And with that, I will pass it back to the chair.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ashley and Adam as well for the presentation today, and certainly to Eric and Chairman Smokey. I'll ask board members if you have any comments or questions on the presentation. Belinda, Ms. Faustinus.
Yes, thank you very much, and appreciate our speakers earlier today, Chairman Smokey and Forest Service Supervisor. So my questions are really about the design element, and I totally get all the EIS findings and all. One of the comments I think I made when it was presented to the board originally was, why the parking lot was basically placed so close to the shoreline and basically, interferes with the view from the camping area to the shore. So I just wanted to get an understanding of, how you address that issue and why the parking lot had to be placed where it's placed now.
Thank you for that question. We did analyze an alternative that looked at having the parking lot essentially be up against the highway, kind of back, in that area that's maybe a little less desirable for camping. And we actually did get a pretty strong response to that, having the parking lot being farther away, that was undesirable for the folks that, especially the day users, coming in and having more of like a drop-off opportunity closer to the beach and having to park farther away, that was undesirable. And also when you go look out on the site there in the location where the parking is, and because of the topography a little bit, there aren't really like great views kind of from the camping area all the way down to the beach, with the exception of maybe a few areas there. So we, in the end, we really felt that the benefits of some of those view sheds from the campground were outweighed by the what perceived loss of access to the day use area for parking.
Okay, thank you for that. The other question I had is where in the design plan do you have expectation of having a shuttle stop as an example to hopefully mitigate for traffic? Is there a bus stop for, in the vicinity that will get people from, some of our centers, to this location?
So there's a little bit of stacking of a few efforts here. So we previously had done sort of a master development plan type exercise with the Washoe tribe related to the circulation within the resort. And so that piece essentially got incorporated into this project here. So there's opportunities with the redevelopment of that day use area to include shuttle stop access there.
Right, that's perfect.
And I would just add to that, that with the 89 corridor management plan, there are plans to relocate some of the parking, and with the bridge replacement, we'll be really relocating some of that parking off the road. And I think transit stops were identified in that plan as well. So I think the next phase with this design phase and with the 89 corridor planning, that will be a time when we can really look at where would it make sense for the buses to come in and turn around and where those stops would be. Yeah.
Great, terrific. So, and just one final comment that, appreciate that you've identified having signage, good interpretation, I think of, all the history basically of the site. And I just want to ensure that the tribe has, and I'm sure that it's part of the process, that they will have a strong role in that, so that it's not just the biological, history of the site, but also the cultural history, and that those issues are really, highlighted in that signage program. So that and incorporates the language of the Washoe tribe as well, because that is something that I think is critically important, that we've lost that sense of history in place, that this is their land that we're now occupying. So bringing that back, I think, is really important.
We definitely agree. And we actually included some specific language in the document related to including the Washoe tribe in development of those interpretation opportunities.
Great. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Conrad Zeta.
Well, Belinda covered nearly everything that I had questions about too. And along those lines with parking, I was interested in, if there is a shuttle stop and everything else, how are you thinking about electric vehicle charging at the site as well? And are you incorporating any renewable energy, over the parking or in the areas to help cover some of the energy demands of the concession? Is that in a future design phase? Is that in this design phase? When would that come in?
We didn't include that specifically in this project because we have some other mechanisms with the Forest Service to be able to implement those types of facilities. It would be pretty easy for us to go through some minimal planning exercise and go out there tomorrow and install a few things. So we didn't specifically include those types of things in this project.
Okay, that's great. That makes sense. And then I guess I just wanted to appreciate how much you have put into trying to balance the built and the natural environment and thinking about how to achieve restoration and still achieve recreational values in the area. And it's really a great example. I think it's something for us to think about, that, the inclusion of a pier would have significantly changed the restoration value or the restoration potential, and also change the look and feel of the entire area. And I think we need to think about that for other areas in the lake as well, as we think about restoration, environmental improvement program, access, views, right? That these piers found now in a federal and state document do completely change our ability to achieve these huge goals that we have for the long-term future of the lake.
Thank you. Mr. Kekeffer?
Thank you. Appreciate it. On the finding that we need to make regarding regional access or opportunities for motorized watercraft, it seems like there was discussion early about the potential for inclusion of a boat ramp that was pretty quickly cast aside. A 38% reduction in the total sort of launch opportunities on the west side of the lake is not insignificant. I'm curious about the process to sort of dismiss the boat ramp concept early, and whether there was any possible way to mitigate that while still sort of meeting the overall goals of the restoration project. Just help me make the finding.
Sure, I'll chime in and then Adam, if you have anything to add there. One clarification, it's 11% of the available moorings on the West Shore.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the moorings, but the launch opportunities.
Oh, I see. The number of boat ramps, is that what you're?
Yeah, it seems
Okay.
like it's 38. They're really, there's one launch location about 4 miles north, and then otherwise you got to get around that. So
I understand, yeah.
the reallocation of the moorings, I think, is a mitigating factor to make sense, but the launch capacity seems to be a
Gotcha.
big gap.
Yeah, we actually looked at that opportunity in multiple different configurations. We looked at being able to essentially on the resort side, kind of punch in a new road kind of behind all the existing cabins to come down by the Kellett House. That's the mansion up on the point there, and have a boat ramp come out the north side, essentially not even in Meeks Bay, but over on the other side of the point. And that area there is very steep, and the amount of infrastructure and the amount of tree removal and visual impacts, even just from putting in that road and that boat ramp there, was pretty significant, as well as the that area there is very rocky, lots of boulders, pretty difficult to put it in over there. We looked at, like Adam mentioned, kind of having a hybrid option in the existing creek location, kind of separating out the creek from what could be just like a boat launch, as well as on the south side. And generally the engineering was the issue. The south side ramp, we had a lot of comments from the folks, the adjacent homeowners, as well as the looking at the circulation and how that would affect the campground and things like that. And it really was pretty quickly identified that that was really a significant impact there. And then once you don't have the marina, the ability to operate a boat ramp, also there's some, there's pieces related to, what you have to do to operate a boat ramp and inside a marina versus outside of a marina, those types of things all played into the fact that having a standalone boat ramp really just wasn't feasible outside of that, basically the existing location that it's in.
And I'll just add that, Meeks Bay itself is pretty shallow once you get out, away from the creek channel itself. And so by relocating if you get the boat ramp outside of the creek channel, it would require some dredging, pretty far out into the lake itself, just to open up a channel where motorized boats could get out. And even with that, it would require that ongoing dredging and would still probably be not operational and at sometimes just due to the fluctuating lake level. So that was another major consideration in addition to all the things Ashley mentioned, including the traffic and just the need for a lot of trailer parking and the extent that would displace a lot of the existing beach use.
Madam Chair, if I may just build on that, Julie Reagan, for the record. In the early days of discussing this project, I did want to let Member Kekeffer know that we had extensive conversations with the local fire district, because at that point, as was mentioned in the presentation, we were trying to look at opportunities for public health and safety peers. And for various reasons, we collectively decided that was not the right location, and the fire professionals were on board with not siting it there. And we took a lot of time, I want to say probably a couple years. So it was thoroughly looked at as part of the process. And the other dynamic in play was the stakeholder group that Rebecca mentioned. The steering committee work and public sentiment was pretty adamantly opposed to a pier. And so that was taken into consideration in the final preferred alternative.
I'll keep coming around the table. Comments, questions? Yes, Ms. Lang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we are fortunate that here on the South Shore, we have Cove East as such a great example of how this not only works, but that it is really doable. And Cove East was one of those that was kind of like a first. It was the closest to the lake where we did a meadow restoration, which is very similar to what we're doing at Meeks Bay. The difference is, of course, that there's a a large marina that's right next door to this restoration work, but it's phenomenal when you go out and look at that meadow now and the wildlife that has returned and the amount of sediment and high pollutants that are no longer flowing rapidly into the lake. It made such a big difference. Meeks Bay is such a different bay in that it is really shallow. And so not having a launch there, you know, in my mind makes total sense, especially because very close to that, there are available public launch sites. So I'm good with that. I kind of cringe a little bit about the 100-foot pedestrian pier because although I can see it in the scenic corridor, I can see it, but it's not that obtrusive. It doesn't go that far out on the lake. And I think when we talk about accessibility to people with disabilities and people who otherwise have a hard time being able to recreate in the way in which people without those same challenges are able to appear is a great way to get somebody like really out kind of on the lake. So I'm very supportive of this plan. I think it's going to make a great improvement in this area, but if, you know, there were a possibility of the 100-foot pedestrian pier coming back into the picture, that would be great. And if not, you know, we still have opportunities down the road with newer inventions that God knows what the opportunities might be that we could bring that back in, but it's an element that I just don't want to just slough off. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions coming around the table? Okay, yes.
Good presentation. I had, it's on.
Ms. Aldi.
Thank you. For the record, Shelley Aldine. So is there anything in our code, and I'm looking to John and Julie, that would preclude reserving the extra slip capacity to the West Shore? Rather than putting it in the pool that would be accessible to everyone around the lake, all the marinas around the lake?
There's nothing that precludes it. We only have one pool. And
could you reserve these specifically for use?
I think we
in the
could
affected
make
area?
as a mitigation measure that the slips, excuse me, the slips would be, or the moorings would be reserved for West Shore marinas. The only issue is there's just not that many West Shore marinas.
Well, maybe my suggestion, John, would be to maybe reserve them for a finite length of time. And if they're not, you know, if there's no demand, then you could release them to other marinas around the lake. But I'd kind of like to give them priority if possible.
Okay, so what I think we would need to do is do we have a mitigation measure, specific mitigation measure on the reservation within, or the returning of the slips to the pool?
Yes, we do.
So we'll add language to that, would you care to, how much time would you like for them to be reserved?
Oh, yeah, there's pool runs out.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
the last
well,
could be the last to go.
well, yeah, that's certainly an alternative.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good suggestion. Okay. And then, thank you for that. So is the beaching of boats permitted or prohibited? I'm talking about outboard motors where you can actually raise the motor. Is it?
Generally,
permitted?
the beaching of boats is not allowed.
It's not allowed anywhere at Lake Tahoe?
I think we have I would need to go back and look, but I think it's part of the shores 2018 shore line plan. We passed a general prohibition on the beaching of
Mhm.
motorized watercraft.
Okay, even if they're outboard motors where the motor can be raised, because I know it's a short, but I mean, it's a shallow area, so it would really only be available to small outboard.
I would have to
motor
look, but
boats.
I'm hoping there's some staff that is out in the ether that has access to a code right now.
Yeah.
They can look and text me, but
Okay,
I'm pretty sure that it's just a straight prohibition on the beaching of motorized
okay.
watercraft.
If it's not, and if a small area could be designated for that purpose, I mean, it takes vehicles off the road. You know, people can motor in and enjoy the amenities at Meeks Bay. You know, obviously, as I say, it would be restricted to boats that are small that can raise their motors. But if we could just maybe look into that and see if it's a
Yeah.
prohibition, a blanket prohibition.
The only thing there is we would then, I think we would need to, if we were going to provide a boat beaching area.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting,
Um,
a small area.
Well, then we would need to take a look at the environmental impacts associated with that, particularly since they're trying to restore the barrier beach and where that might be,
Mhm.
particularly in relationship to the Tahoe Yellow.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, we're looking at more access via the water, and I understand the opposition to, you know, an area to launch boats. I understand the concern about a lengthy dock that could accommodate the docking of boats, but that would be kind of a mitigation, in other words, for the loss of the pier and for the loss of other, you know, waterborne vehicles to access Mix Bay.
The only thing I would caution is that this is a Forest Service project.
Mhm.
So it's really up to them to propose uses like that.
Sure.
Um,
Well,
but
what if they're contrary to our code?
they're not, that one may be contrary to our code.
Okay,
But it would then requires a code revision to allow them to have a
Okay.
specific beaching area.
Well, I
But it's
know that-
also up to them as to whether they want to have that.
Sure.
Then we would analyze whether or not there's any
Okay, okay. Well,
associated impacts with it.
I'm merely suggesting that as an alternative. Is there a prohibition for daylight anchoring offshore?
No.
Okay, so that would be an alternative. People could anchor
Correct.
their boats and swim to shore. That would
And
be. no
there's
way.
lots of that occurs.
Yeah,
Ashley?
okay, okay.
Yeah, maybe I could speak really quickly to the beaching of the boats. Currently on Forest Service sites, if an area is not designated as a swimming beach,
Mhm.
boats can beach and, you know, people could offload. So any
Okay.
area that is outside of a designated swimming beach, that would be something that would be an allowable activity.
Okay. Well,
In,
because I know
in
if-
general, we don't have any areas where it's sort of designated that this is like
Mhm.
the boat s- beaching spot, but it is technically allowed outside of a.
Okay, because
certain
I know in previous discussions in previous years, and the Forest Service was pretty adamant about having a dock, you know, too, because obviously their focus is on recreation and maximizing the utility of the area that they own, and it's in this case being restored. But just something to consider. Okay, all right, thank you.
Any comments? Okay, Ms. Loomer, did you have any comments online?
No, I mean, I can just say, you know, really quickly that I really appreciate the presentation. I really appreciate Chairman Smokey joining us today. I'm in full support of the record decision as written, and really hope that this can be, you know, the first step in eventually getting this land back to the tribe. So thank you.
Thank you. Then I would just maybe ask a question of those of you who worked on the project, because I was involved early on, and I know the public safety officials were really concerned about not having public safety access down there. And I'm wondering if during those discussions, anyone talked to them about approaching some of the private pier owners to have, you know, we never know where an accident might happen on the lake and what the water conditions and wind conditions might be. There's so many piers on the lake. It seems like they could identify with property owners, private property owners, that potential to use that as an emergency egress or safety. Did anybody discuss that with them?
I mean, we did have that discussion with them in sort of the general concept related to, you know, where is the best place to put an emergency access pier. I think in relevance to this particular project, you know,
Yeah.
we were having, you know, more specific conversations related to this specific project. I think, you know, not to speak for them, but I think their major concern was being able to have a place specifically to store a boat that was above, you know, that was lifted and above the wave action, I think was their main concern.
Okay, so they were looking at storing about, I thought we were talking at one point about egress. So if there was an emergency on the lake, that they didn't have to go either all the way to South Shore or quite a ways up the
I
West
think
Shore.
there was multiple benefits that they were looking at, but
Okay.
really when we talked about what are the options and we talked about, you know, driving, driving, is there a place where you could drive up on the beach? Is that an option? Is if we had a pier that didn't have a lift on it, is that an option? We kind of went through a lot
Yeah.
of those various conversations. And I think what they were really looking for specifically with this was to be able to have a boat that was lifted up out of the water to provide the maximum safety for their folks during that ingress and egress process.
Okay.
With the feeling that during high wave action, having something that is not attached or having to, beach onto the shore was a safety concern.
Okay. Well, I was just trying to help solve their problem because I work with those fire chiefs quite a bit and
I think it's an option that's still worth exploring.
yeah, they made a compelling case that there's limited access for several miles there and what can they do?
I think the other issue, just really quickly related to the egress in that location, is that if you get someone off of the lake in Meeks Bay, you still have to either get to Truckee or get to South Lake. So you still have to go through all of the traffic and go through, all of the issues that we all have in getting through the Emerald Bay area. And that really, generally, if there is an emergency where somebody needs to be taken off the lake for medical purposes, actually driving down to South Lake is a much faster and a much better option.
Yeah, and it just
egressing there.
depends on those conditions. As you
Yes.
know, it can be pretty treacherous at times, and they are doing more with their helicopter rescues now that we
Mhm.
have a lot of helicopters in and around.
And I think there was also discussion about basically having sort of a safe harbor for folks in storms and things to be able to get off the lake and, coming back to the conversation related to beaching, in an emergency situation, anybody can drive their boat up onto the beach and get out if they really need to.
Okay. Mhm. Yes. Uh-huh.
So I'm wondering, this is kind of out of the box, but in connection with our lottery program for new peers, I'm wondering if we can't include in the checklist that we use, if somebody, for example, comes forth and is interested in a single-use dock or even a multiple-use dock, and they're willing to kind of cooperate with the local emergency folks. In other words, they're willing to allow a portion of that dock to be used for the purposes of installing a lift that could accommodate, our emergency service personnel. And maybe that would cause their application to, rise up above the others. I mean, use that as a criteria. I mean, that may be one of the way, by giving a positive incentive to some of the folks who are interested in a single-use dock or even a multi-use dock. We could give them a priority position in terms of an allocation. I'm just suggesting that, obviously, to staff, maybe something worth considering. Positive incentives are always helpful.
Great suggestion. We're traveling a bit outside of our agenda item. But we can, yes. Yeah.
I'm trying to solve problems like we are supposed to. Yes, Mr. Settlemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just kind of curious for a point of context. When was the last time a boat was taken in or out of that Meeks Bay?
2015.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I follow up on one thing? The most important thing to me that I forgot to mention was the conversation around the transit stops. I think that now, since, we're actively looking at trying to activate the Highway 89 corridor plan, that we should stay in close communication, because, as you know, we're trying to get transit to go from the North Shore to Emerald Bay and back, and then again from the South Shore to Emerald Bay and back. And so the idea, I heard it mentioned that you would have like stops where shuttles could turn around. Probably the more realistic thing is that they would be a stop on the way and it would be a stop on the way back. We don't need so much room, I don't think, for turnarounds, although we should keep it in mind. But those transit stops should absolutely correlate with everything else we're trying to do on Highway 89.
Yeah, that's good to keep in mind. Since we're moving forward on the 89 corridor and the Caltrans bridge as well, I think it'll be really important that we all keep in touch on the design elements so that we're taking advantage of all this, right? So we're tracking. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
To mention. So thank you. I just wanted to encourage that the stakeholder group that was put together for this effort, hopefully it continues through the, this whole process. I think that's a critical element that needs to happen. And I would also encourage, and I know that there has been some funding provided to the tribe to be able to, get their active participation, which should be compensated. I think a lot of times, we ask a lot of our community groups in terms of their staff time. And if we can, really make sure that that is funded and any other group, frankly, that is participating in this, and, they're just not paid to do this kind of work, and we should find some way to incentivize that so that we have a broad range of constituent participation. I just, personally, I spent 2 honeymoons at not honeymoons, 2 anniversaries
well.
at Meeks Bay. 1 honeymoon, not there. And, just the opportunity for families to enjoy that site, I can't stress it enough. I mean, it's such a great place that, I just really want to make sure that we get that local input and that, we can make sure that it is going to service the community.
Great. With that, I'm going to go to public comment on this item. Are there members of the public that would like to address us on this? It's afternoon. Laura.
Yeah, it is afternoon. Good point. We got moved from morning to afternoon. So good morning, Chair, board members. My name is Laura Patton. I'm the Natural Resource Director at the League to Save Lake Tahoe. So the League has been involved in the Meeks Bay Restoration Project for actually almost a decade as a key stakeholder. And, this project in conjunction with our mission, is really to have this unprecedented opportunity to restore this sensitive habitat and the natural hydrologic function of this beach barrier lagoon system that has been altered and degraded for over a century. This project and this record of decision as written, we've done almost a decade again of stakeholder input and of public input on this project, which really, the majority, I would say over 90% of the comments from stakeholders and the public has been to proceed with this project as written and before you today, which, again, not only restores habitat for Meeks Bay and the creek, but also restores habitat for threatened and endangered species, eradicates the infestation of Eurasian water milfoil, which we've been concerned about at that site, reduces sediment input from the erosion and scouring in Meeks Creek, and then also restores that aquatic organism passage under State Route 89, which is really important. So the League feels that, TRPA, the Forest Service, the Washoe Tribe, really we all share common goals in this project. And that's really to see this fully restored and functioning Meeks Creek and Meeks Lagoon for the benefit of Lake Tahoe and also for that non-motorized recreation as well. So we really look forward to working with all of the agencies, with the tribe, and with the public really to see this through to implementation, which I know is going to take many years, but will continue to be a stakeholder. I'd also really like to thank TRPA staff, Ascent, and Forest Service staff for working so hard on this project after, almost a decade. So it's been a lot of work that's gone into this, and we're really proud of where the project has been. So, I really recommend that the governing board certify this environmental impact statement and that we move forward into implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Are there any other members of the public in the room? Okay, then we'll go to those online. Please raise your hand if you would like to address the board on this item.
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Okay. Last call for any public comment. There we go. There's one hand that just came up.
Trish, Tahoe area, if you unmute, please make your comment.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I run the Tahoe area ALS M&D Research Library. on, we have all of our documents lodged on Facebook. And one of the areas that we focus on is the intersection of neurodegeneration and cyanobacteria toxins. We have the highest number of ALS cases in the country in Lake Tahoe, along with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Some of these toxins, especially BMAA, which is beta amino L-alanine, is one of the causation factors for neurodegeneration in ALS cases. For some reason, once again, everybody has left out the cyanotoxin testing portion of their analysis. I read everyone's documents, all of a sense. I read all the public comment, and I didn't see anybody mention, oh gosh, we were down in the creek and this is what we saw. Nobody. So I'm just wondering why you guys would leave that information out, since it affects the public. And I took photographs of the creek last summer or the fall, took a grab sample, and we found evidence of cyanotoxins in that creek. And I just expect homework to do their due diligence and actually treat cyanobacteria, blooms and toxins, and the picocyanobacteria, which you can't see, as something really important for the people that live in this lake, live with this lake. And, I'm working with Dr. James Haney from the University of New Hampshire. I'm working with Dr. Elijah Stommel at Dartmouth, and we are slowly putting together a project that will involve dealing with the ALS cases at the lake and the sources of the cyanotoxins. And I will say one thing, some of the projects that have happened, like at Talat Creek and Taylor Creek, you've put down black plastic to kill the invasive weeds, and instead you have a cyanobacteria bloom. I have photographs of that also from the last couple of years. So sometimes trying to fix one problem causes something else. And at any rate, anyone can join our page. It's public. It's called Tahoe Area ALS MND Research Library. I don't have the time right now to go into all the details, but I'm happy to, if people, connect and reach out, I'm happy to talk to them. And anyway, thank you for this time. I recognize everyone's efforts and the huge amount of work that's gone into this project. We came into this rather late. In 2022, we were getting ready for our first study on cyanotoxins as aerosolized molecules in the air. And our report is available online under Lake Tahoe Aerosol Toxins 2022. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Trish. Next speaker.
The next hand raise is Wendy Loomis. Wendy, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, good afternoon. Wendy Loomis, President of the Washoe Development Corporation. We actually operate and manage Mixed Bay Resort for the tribe. I'd like to say good afternoon, Madam Chair and Governing Board. And big thank you to Eric Walker and Ashley Seiber from the Forestry Service for all their collaboration. We are super excited. As you heard earlier, we just got awarded the next permit for the next 20 years to operate. We have some amazing projects that we're looking at doing for renovation and improving the resort. I know that there's been a lot of involvement with Rihanna Johns, the director of the Washoe Environmental Group, and she is super excited about the plans moving forward. And we totally support the choice for the alternative, and we're excited to continue being involved. One thing I did wanted to share really quickly was for Ashley to respond on the EV charging piece. We have looked into doing EV charging stations up there, and good, bad, or indifferent, there's not a lot of power up there. I think when Meeks was originally designed, it was meant to be recreational and not have a ton of power going through it. And so it would be very hard to do that right now, but in the future, we will obviously consider some of those programs. But I wanted to thank everybody, let you know the tribe is very, very involved, very, very excited. And if we can help with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for your comments. I don't see any other hands up raised. Staff, are you seeing any other hands? Sometimes I
There are
miss
no other
them.
hands raised, Madam Chair.
Okay, then we'll close the public comment. I'll bring it back to the board. Yes, yeah.
Ashley Conrad-Sater for the record, just to follow up on that last comment, I think knowing that there's not a lot of power, it probably makes sense then to really think about solar for next phases, given that there's good sun and depending on the way the panels are arrayed over a parking lot or over buildings, it could really then contribute to vehicle charging and make a really great energy conservation project.
Great suggestion. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll come back unless there's other board comments and consider the actions in front of us. Yes, Adam.
Would the board like to consider a revision to the mitigation measure about reserving the moorings that was discussed earlier?
I think that can be made as part of the motion.
Yeah. And I have some suggested language if you'd like.
Would you like to hear?
For the mitigation?
Please.
So just for the record, the mitigation measure in the environmental document is currently mitigation measure 3.1-3, maintain capacity for public moorings. And this reads, TRPA will add the number of boat slips removed from Meeks Bay Marina, 119 boat slips, into the pool of moorings available for marinas. And I'd suggest the board considers adding one sentence to that to say these moorings will be reserved for marinas on the west shore of Lake Tahoe until the remainder of the pool of moorings available to marinas is exhausted.
Just a clarification on the definition of marina, because there are also very few of those on the West Shore. Does that just imply any place where a public area, not a private use, but a public use? It could be, I don't know what other public areas are available, but there's only a couple marinas on the whole West Shore.
We have a marina pool and we also have a public pool. So I don't think we don't need to make these eligible beyond marinas because we already have a pool for those other public spaces like the moorings available for boat-in campsites, etc. So I think we have an allocation for that specific use, or were you wanting to expand the number of, or the use of these particular moorings?
Well, I would like to make it as broad as possible for use on the West Shore, just because you're not going to fit 119 into Obexers and Sunnyside. Those are the only two on the West Shore. So
the only issue would be is the distribution between those two pools. We need for it's an easy fix to get it into one pool or the other pool. It's a much harder deal to distribute it and then track it. So
My suggestion, I mean, if we're trading like for like, I mean, the slips that are available or were available at Mix Bay were open to the public. So I think it needs to be restricted to for a price. No, I understand that, but they were open to the public on a first come, first served basis if you're willing to pay the fee. So I would think would be better to make them available. And I would like to expand, I guess, the definition of West Shore to include the Tahoe City Marina. I mean, when I think of Tahoe City, I don't think of it as North Shore. I think of it more on the West Shore. And maybe we can define it, geographically. Maybe not, West Shore is too vague a reference. But I agree. I mean, there are obviously limited opportunities, but if you include the boat works in Tahoe City, I mean, that would expand the availability to another marina.
Well, and I would add Camp Rich to that as well. I was going to ask that question. Is that considered West Shore?
I think we're trying to solve a problem that sounds like it requires a little bit more thought and putting it into a motion. Like I'm thinking about the unintended consequences of this motion that haven't been evaluated and the demand for this type of solution with what we're facing today. And so I worry that we're holding up finalizing this EIS, EIR with a motion that doesn't have full analysis of the EIS, EIR. We're just considering and suddenly saying, what about putting them in these locations, these locations, these locations? Then we're not looking at the unintended consequences of that action as well. So I don't want to hold up this decision for this new motion.
Well, we could do one and then say we're going to revisit it potentially and revise it or something. But I don't think I would go down to Camp Richardson because from the West Shore, that might as well be back in the Bay Area, driving around Emerald Bay in the summer or something. Like even Tahoe
Think
City.
about it as being on the water, going from Camp Rich to Meeks Bay is a hop, skip, and a jump.
On the water, but
On the water.
not by car to get to your boat.
But we're talking.
And that's the
talking
thing
about
the thing that I see is by moving those, people, if they get their boat moored somewhere else, they've got to drive either into or past Tahoe City, which is highly congested, or down around
take a
Emerald Bay.
transit
Madam
shuttle.
Chair,
Yeah.
we've had a lot of crosstalk
traffic.
going on
Yeah,
here.
if
I
this
think
is
it'd be
getting-
appropriate if people state their name for the record before they talk. Sorry to interject. This is James Settlemeyer. In their respect, Ms. Gustafson. If I can
Thanks
make
for
a
the
quick,
reminder of how I should run these meetings. I
Ms. Gustafson,
apologize.
if I can make a comment.
Yes, Director Settlemeyer.
I think we're way off our agenda item by this discussion. I would prefer to have the discussion of how we pull these at a future agenda rather than discussed here, because I do not believe the general public had any concept or knowledge or thought that this discussion would take place here today. And I don't think it's appropriate transparency wise to do so. Thank you.
Can I just try to may have a suggestion as I do think we're agendized to talk about certification of the EIS, and one of the mitigations in the EIS is the addition of making sure that these moorings go back into the marina pool. And so what I suggest is we make that happen consistent with what is being proposed. And within the context of, you saw earlier, things to come, there was a shoreline item, and bring back a discussion item as to whether or not you want to look at that marina pool as it was augmented by your action today, and then see if you want a different distribution of or reservation of some of those allocations for however we want, and might then discuss about the West Shore or something like that.
So Shelley Haldane for the record. So it doesn't implicate the environmental document. In other words, because it's based on what is being represented here today as a mitigation, they go into the pool and they can be theoretically used anywhere around the lake. And so our restricting where they can be used is not going to have a more negative impact from an environmental standpoint, right? So I agree with what you're proposing, John.
Okay.
Take your win.
Yes.
And Madam Chair, Julie
Yes,
Reagan,
yes.
TRPA Director, for the record, I will add, as you saw on the slide for shoreline update, we are proposing some shoreline policy amendments. So we will commit to include that into the discussion when we bring back a bit of a potpourri of various ideas that we're working through right now.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll go back to the proposed actions that you see and look for a motion. Yes.
Okay, I would like to make the first motion to make the findings required by the Compact Article 7, Chapter 3 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances and Article 6 of the Rules of Procedure.
Would you mind reading off of the screen, because we put out the errata?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, these 73-year-olds. Make the findings required by the Compact Article 7, Chapter 3 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances and Article 6 of the Rules of Procedure as shown in the revised attachment B in the errata handout. There you go.
Okay. So we have that motion, and does that include the mitigation revision that we discussed?
There is no mitigation.
Okay, okay.
We were going to bring that back for
Okay,
subsequent
okay.
discussion.
Great. All right. We'll call the roll call for the vote.
Ms. Alding,
Yes.
Mr. Bass. Mr. Aguilar,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos,
Yes.
Mr. Keycapper,
Yes.
Mr. Hennigan,
Yes.
Ms. Hales,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemyre,
Yes.
Ms. Loomer,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, motion passes.
Okay, would you like to continue with the second motion?
Surely. Certify the final environmental impact statement for the Meeks Bay Restoration Project.
Thank you. Go ahead and call the roll.
Ms. Loomer,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemyre,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Hales,
Yes.
Mr. Honigman,
Yes.
Mr. Keycapper,
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Mr. Aguilar,
Yes.
Mr. Bass, Ms. Alding,
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Well, congratulations for a lot of hard work to all of you. Great job. Excited to see this move forward. Mr. Chairman, thank you for honoring us today and being here and present, and all the efforts you've put in. Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to our final agenda item, and this is our general public comment. Any member of the public wishing to address the governing board on any item listed or not listed on the agenda, including items on the consent calendar, may do so at this time. Individuals or groups who have already commented on items are not permitted to comment on that same topic. The governing board is prohibited by law from taking immediate action or on discussing issues raised by the public during the public comment period. Final comments must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of the agency. So with that, I will look for any public in the room that would like to address the board. And I don't see any. And so now we'll go online. Any of you online that are listening in, please raise your hand on Zoom or dial *9 on your phone.
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Okay. Then I will close the public comment period. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned at 2:10 p.m.